Minister Bains, before we talk about the road to recovery, we are more than 3 months into this pandemic. And I wanted to get your opinion in terms of the impact on the ground when it comes to innovation, science, and industry. What are you hearing?
I'm hearing a lot about the importance to collaborate. People recognize more than ever they want industry and they want governments to work together. And that's what we've seen in this current crisis. You've seen the federal government work very closely with their provincial and municipal counterparts. We're seeing the health authorities locally coordinating with Health Canada. And I'm personally very, very eager to work with the Industry Strategy Council, which represents a diverse group of sectors and innovative companies across the Canadian economy. And we put this council together, this Industry Strategy Council, representing the different sectors to better understand their needs and concerns going forward. So collaboration and partnership are two key themes that have emerged in this crisis. And I think that's going to really lay the foundations going forward as we restart the economy and talk about the long-term recovery.
When you talk about some of that work being done on that special committee, can you dive into that a bit further as far as what you've been able to accomplish and your goals in the months to come?
So as a government, we've taken an approach to help individuals and businesses through broad-based support measures. Their income support, liquidity measures, but we've seen with this crisis, with the COVID-19 crisis, the impact on different sectors is unique, from tourism, from food and accommodation, to manufacturing, to the aerospace sector and auto sector. And so we need to understand what are those unique pain points for each of the different sectors in the Canadian economy. And right now we've established a council, this Industry Strategy Council, that'll do a deep dive in understanding those unique challenges to help us better shape policies and programs and solutions on a going forward basis to assist them with the economic recovery.
I'd love to dive a little further into some of these solutions and talk about the scientific community. I think what many people are experiencing right now is that they're looking for those moments of hope. When we look at the scientific response in this country and talk about things such as technologies, treatments, and vaccines, what are some of the promising highlights that you're seeing?
You're absolutely right. There's a lot of hope pinned on science. Our government recognizes that science is absolutely critical in finding solutions and determining new ideas that will really help citizens, particularly with the current crisis. And our government already laid down the foundation, and I think that context is important. We made the single largest investment in Canadian science over the past 50 years. And we believe that investment enabled us to develop some really promising solutions. If you look at the Ebola vaccine that was developed here in Canada, if you look at the sequencing of the DNA for SARS that was done here in Canada as well. And what we've done in the current context is invest $2 billion more for COVID-19 related science investments. And that's translated to specific initiatives like Abcelera, a biotech company out of British Columbia that has identified about 6 million cells that it's analyzed and searched in the human body from COVID-19 patients that have recovered. And it's identified 500 antibodies. And now it's narrowed down to one single antibody that they can use as a therapy. And that's going to clinical trials. And we help fund that. And Abcelera, with their partners, are moving forward with this initiative. And that's an example of Canadian ingenuity, creativity, and the science coming together to find meaningful solutions for Canadians.
I think when we hear these highlights, many of us remain hopeful. I want to shift gears for a second and look at the technology community, because we've spoken before and we know that there has been some incredible momentum over the past few years when it comes to the technology sector here in Canada. And what worries me a little bit is that perhaps we have lost some of that momentum. And I wonder what you would say to some of these startup founders right now who are trying to keep their businesses alive. What would you say to them in terms of helping them to continue with that momentum that we've seen over the past few years?
I think simply put, we have your back. We recognize that technology and innovation and the startup ecosystem are going to be critical for our economic recovery. And that is why we put forward measures to really support talent and retaining talent. We know that's the number one issue that the tech companies talk about, or all businesses essentially talk about, is how do you attract talent? How do you retain talent? How do you develop talent? And we put forward a program through the National Research Council called the Industrial Research Assistance Program, which has supported 2,000 tech firms. And these are startup companies, pre-revenue, SaaS, high growth firms that have benefited from measures to retain a highly skilled, highly innovative employees.
In a recent interview, speaking again about the technology sector, you did an interview for Game Changer where you said that companies need to be nimble and flexible. And I think that we're seeing an enormous amount of acceleration in the technology space in terms of digitization. What would you say to those businesses who maybe aren't adapting quickly enough? What is the risk?
Look, we are dealing with very challenging times, or we're in challenging times and dealing with some very difficult issues. And companies are rethinking their business models. They're rethinking how their supply chains are operating, as opposed to just in time. It's just in case is the new model that I'm hearing from quite a few businesses. And so they need to adapt, as you mentioned. And one such example of that is companies that manufacture medical grade gowns. We know that those gowns are in high demand globally, and there are over 20 Canadian manufacturers that are able to source local material through construction house wrap or through the nylon in the airbags to meet Health Canada standards to produce and manufacture millions of medical grade gowns right here in Canada. So that's an example of how companies are adapting. And that's the kind of ingenuity, the creativity, the mindset we need to have as we're dealing with this crisis and as we navigate our way through this crisis.
I would love to talk a little further about this Made in Canada approach. I'm thinking about a company I interviewed a few weeks ago called Canadian Shield. When I talked to them in early April, they had 8 employees, and then within weeks they had 150, and it continues to grow. What are some of the benefits of this Made in Canada approach, and how do we continue with that momentum that we're seeing?
Well, we have a very strong industrial base here in Canada, and that's a point of pride, and that's enabled us to play a leadership role in this initiative called Made in Canada project, where we had a call to action, and over 6,000 companies came forward with their ideas to retool or scale up production. And we've seen 700 companies do that in a meaningful way. And examples like you mentioned just highlight the importance of having a strong industrial base. And what we've been able to do is take individuals like Art McDonald, who's a Nobel laureate, who came forward with a really cool solution to build ventilators, and matched them up and paired them up with a local manufacturer, Vexus in Markham, to help build those ventilators here in Canada. And these are thousands and thousands of ventilators that would be built here in Canada. We've also been able to retool a portion of the GM facility in Oshawa to build masks. So these are great examples of how Made in Canada has stepped up in a big way to build personal protective equipment for frontline healthcare workers and to ultimately help Canadian businesses as we move forward in the restarting of the economy.
My last question for you is about the next generation, because I think in this short conversation, what we've seen is that some of those more established companies will be able to get through this difficult time. What do you say to the next generation, to those students who have just graduated from university and are just starting out?
Look, it's tough. Make no mistake. I think a lot about the future, especially when I talk to my 2 young daughters about their path forward and the careers that they want to pursue. And I know many people have been disheartened with the current healthcare crisis and what this means for their job prospects. That's why we put forward measures to provide immediate support through the emergency response benefit for students. That's $1,250 a month for the next 4 months. But more importantly, we've also invested in initiatives to promote work integrated learning. Over 100,000 co-op positions, intern positions, internships will be designed in a way to make sure that young people get the experiences that they need working for companies right now. And it's a great opportunity because companies are pivoting, either rethinking their business models, are reevaluating how to gain market share or even maintain their business in this crisis. So you can learn a lot during this moment, and that's why we're really promoting these work integrated learning opportunities for young people, so they gain this meaningful experience, which will enable them to have a successful career.
Minister Bains, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks very much for having me on.
And thanks so much for watching. You're watching Collision from Home.